What's good? Oh, family. How you be? How you be? Yeah, what's good? Might as well just take it as being Bobby Brown tonight because I'm good to go solo. What's happening out there, family? All nicked up? Happy New Year's, or did we get past New Year's last time? I think we are. I think we're, in the first couple of weeks of January now. January is a good month. It happens to be my birthday month for all those that want to know. So shout out to all the Capricorns that's out there. We do lovely things, and I always say we begin the year and we also end the year. So that's what makes us very special people. We might have some guests on tonight. I'm not quite sure. The guys seem to have dipped and left their boy out here on Survivor Island by itself, but it's all gravy. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the New York Knicks. You know, the Knicks right now are 5-5 in the last 10 games, if I'm not mistaken. We've had a little rough stretch, but we have won 2 out of the last 3. Lost to Phoenix, one of the games. The other ones was the Clippers, and the other one escapes me, but I know we are 2 out of the last 3. Of course, you know, we're reaching that time of the year where I called it the dog days of January. A lot of teams are struggling as we enter into the month of January. We've seen not only the Knicks struggle, but we've seen OKC struggle a little bit after the Cup. We've also saw the Houston Rockets, one of the favorite teams, actually struggle. Surprisingly enough, the Denver Nuggets, who are without Jokic, is actually playing extremely good basketball still. So they've managed to maintain, you know, their integrity as a team. Basically rolling out a few role players and Aaron Gordon. So that's how it's been working for the league. But it's definitely an atmosphere you can feel where, you know, teams are starting to creep up that you wouldn't believe in. And initially, we saw Boston actually at one point leapfrog us in the actual standing. So that's always a pretty interesting thing. New York and Boston. However, I think we put a little bit of a smackdown on them. Well, actually, the San Antonio put a smackdown on them, I should say, and now we are back in second place. So it's a very up and down season for the Knicks post-Cup. But we seem to, you know, maybe hitting our stride back again. Let's hope so. But, you know, being that we called it the dog days of January, I said, well, we're just going to go through a little, we're going to make it a kennel. I'm the dog catcher tonight. So that's what I'm saying. So I'm just going to start off with the first subject that I wanted to broach, which is pretty much a lightning rod for the whole season and controversial player in itself. So I said, well, we might as well talk about the one guy who always seems to be the hot topic, which is Karl-Anthony Towns. I entitled this one, Cat versus Dog. And anybody who knows about cats versus dogs, there's usually some adversity going on where the dog chases the cat. If you're a George Clinton fan, needless to say, we are definitely in the part of the year, Get At Me Dog DMX. So we're asking the pertinent question these days. We've seen Karl-Anthony Towns from beginning to current seemingly struggle with the system that Mike Brown has in play. I guess the question that we are all going to vote is, you know, will Cat find his grit in this system? You know, he's an extremely important player, the second best player on the Knicks per se, at least if we're talking about from a scoring perspective. He's been a juggernaut, you know, his entire career as far as from scoring. But we're now seeing dips in his performance that we have not seen since he was a rookie. A lot of struggles going on as far as adapting to the system. A lot of frustrations from the fan base, and seemingly even with him on the floor. Old Nick nemesis Paul Pierce, while being on his show with Kevin Garnett, you know, their podcast going on, he mentioned that he felt as if Karl-Anthony Towns wasn't happy in New York, that he may ask out himself. You know, this is all conjecture. You know, Paul is always like needling the New York Knicks fan base. You know, he obviously had a lot of great success playing against us on the floor while we were not a great team. And he kind of relishes in the fact of being a Knick troll, so to say, constant Knick hater. I mean, we saw him supposedly walk the long road to the studio when he was on Fox for proclaiming that the Knicks would never win. I think it was against Boston, and he had to, ante up on the bet. However, he did bring up a very good point. Whether you like him or dislike him, you do have to ask yourself the question on whether or not Carl does want to be here. We saw in the last game in Portland, Mike Brown opted to not play him for the last 9 minutes and 42 seconds of the fourth quarter. Usually an unheard of thing, being that he did have a great amount of success in the game. He made his numbers. I think he reached a double-double. It was 25 points, 10 boards. Correct me if I'm wrong if you're out there. And in doing so, he had like a successful game coming into the fourth, but the Knicks ended up opting to go with a smaller ball lineup that included Mitchell Robinson, I believe, Jalen Brunson, both Anunoby and Bridges, and I believe Miles McBride was the other person. This was also a time we didn't see. No, I'm sorry. It was Josh Hart. My bad. We also saw a time where Tyler Kolek also didn't get minutes. So I don't know. I guess we got to ask the question. Mike Brown, when posed with the question, alluded to the fact that he decided to just go with the actual best lineup at the time, and that lineup did prosper. We saw some stingy defense towards the end. They played with a lot of grit and determination, a lot of hustle. OG Anunoby broke loose, after having a bad outing 2 games ago. Bad results, I should say, of clanking the free throws in the end of the game in Phoenix. We saw a rejuvenated OG, a very determined OG, a guy who was looking to shut down whoever was in front of him. Portland's a good upstart young team. Danny Avia, guy who I wanted the Knicks to draft, is actually playing like an all-star. So I don't think that this win in Portland should be dismissed as just a average game. Portland is legit. They've had some big games against some really great teams. So legit win. But we did see the tenacity on defense come alive. I guess the question we have to ask is whether or not that's something that we would have seen if Karl Towns was in the game, because I think the clear message, whether Mike Brown wants to definitively say this, is that we know that Karl sometimes wanes. That's what we've been seeing a lot from him. We see a guy who sometimes is extremely engaged, and from being extremely engaged, he can go and be aloof, in the next quarter. So you never know what kind of person you're getting this year in particular. He started off showing that he had a great amount of frustration even in training camp, where he alluded to the fact that he had no clue what was going on. I mean, that's something that is very telling, especially when you see most of your teammates seemingly accepting their roles and learning to adapt. So I don't know. I guess you got to, I don't know. What do you guys think that's out there if you're able to respond? Should we look to move off of a guy like Karl Towns? I mean, granted, you cannot do it probably in season, but in the off season, he's due for an extension. The highest paid contract is from Karl Towns. So, I guess the question does arise, is this not a perfect fit? I mean, we saw him have success under Thibodeau. A lot of isolation ball with Thibodeau. It wasn't like it was this fluid offense or quick hitting offense that Mike Brown has instituted. Offense that actually requires a lot of the 5 position and the 4 position. You have to learn all those positions. Albeit, I mean, I do have to pose the question, when we hear about Karl struggling to find anything, Mitchell Robinson seemingly plays the same kind of defense. I mean, in the same kind of position. He doesn't, he's not a scoring big. If anything, it's just some handoff dribbles, and he protects the rim. And obviously, he's a beast on getting offensive rebounds. So, I mean, I guess we have to ask: is it just the center position, or could it be just Karl Towns is resisting change? Used to having a lot of the focus put on him. I mean, outside of when Ant-Man arrived in Minnesota was Karl Towns' team. Offensively, everything flowed through him. So he's come here, not seemingly complaining when he arrived. We all knew Jalen Brunson was the guy on this team. So it wasn't like no big surprise that he came in and kind of acquiesced and said, well, you're Cap. I'm here to just kind of support you in that role. And we haven't seen any animosity since he arrived. But however, we do see the frustration this year. Is this something that he can overcome? I'm almost sure he can. Maybe the Knicks coaching staff and even the players can find a way of still getting him acclimated or started. We spoke about that, I guess, on our last show about maybe Jalen Brunson having to get this guy started, or even Mike Brown running some sets for him. But the one thing we're learning about the league, a league that was absent of playing defense for so long, we're starting to see people call other guys out. We've seen it with Luka Doncic. We've seen it with Karl Anthony Towns. We see it with Jalen Brunson even. People saying, hey, look, you have to also play on the other side of the ball. You have to be motivated to contribute more than just scoring, because you do have to shut down someone, especially when you're talking about the Knicks. The Knicks, the knock on the Knicks is having two subpar defenders in Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, both who, when you think about it, can kind of lead to a chain reaction. The point of attack is Jalen Brunson's spot. So the point of attack has to be, if it's not guarded well, and you're causing a collapse in the defense, the collective defense. So now when that ball is getting driven into the paint, you have now a guy with questionable rim protection or questionable ability to read actually the play coming towards them. So when you think about that dynamic, you can understand why there's a good, healthy level of concern about the Knicks and about how they will fare against a team, say like a Detroit Pistons, where you have a Cade Cunningham who's, becoming a candidate for MVP and, wanting to stake his flag and knowing that he might be the best point guard in the East. I mean, it's all up for debate. Jalen to me still has the edge. They won the series last year, and until that's proven or made different, I'm still going to give the nod to our dude Brunson. However, we're talking about the future playoff that's coming, and right now the Pistons are probably the team that is going to give the Knicks the most hell come postseason. So you got to look at that dynamic and say, can you actually keep both of these guys on the floor when they actually kind of coexist in a way that makes the Knicks defense even more vulnerable? We've asked and inquired about having the wing stop guys that we refer to as Dobermans come out to actually help and defend. But, when you're playing defense and it's like 3-on-5, that's asking for a nightmare result. And, Mike Brown clearly might have thought about that coming down the stretch in a very tight game. Like I said, Portland is a very feisty team. So no one needs to think that they're going to just roll over. So they were giving the Knicks the business. They're also a very tall, lengthy team. Something that the Knicks don't have a lot of is the length, other than once you get rid of OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, you get to the Lilliputian stage where you have a lot of small guards. And then you don't have a lot of tenacious defenders at the rim outside of Mitchell Robinson. I think we were expecting a little bit more out of Huck Porty. I would have thought he would have played a lot better, but he seems like he's kind of hit a wall somewhere. Maybe it's because he's not getting the amount of minutes he needs to actually develop into something different. However, sometimes he's looked a little bit lost on the floor, a little mindless on the fouls. He's every 5 or 6 games he plays in that he might look like someone that you believe has a lot more potential than maybe he's able to exhibit on a consistent basis. So in looking at that, the Knicks definitely have to think about maybe doing something a little bit different. We're not in a league of a bunch of tall centers. So when you're talking about having to guard a team, it's very wing-oriented and power forward, if you want to say it, or small forward-oriented teams. A guy like Draymond Green, he plays center in this league. So that's letting you know there's clearly a non-height requirement, as it was in the 80s and the 90s, where most of those guys were 7 foot tall. But in looking the Knicks may have found what I felt was a great closing lineup in Portland. I thought it was tenacious. I thought it spelled a lot of what we saw from the Knicks about 2 years ago when they played a gritty style. About 2 seasons ago. I think whenever OG Anunoby arrived on the Knicks, we started getting that layer of that consistency where we're saying, wow, this team reeled off 13 or 14 games, whatever it was in January, before Julius Randle went down. So we got a chance to see kind of the small ball action with the fierce defense. It works. It works in this league. The problem being is that the Knicks requires the scoring on the other end sometimes because their defense seems to coincide with how well they're scoring the ball. So if they're not engaged on the offensive end, the defense has shown to suffer. However, what we saw with that small ball lineup is everybody got a touch. Everybody was involved. Everybody's scrambling and scrapping for the ball. So when you saw that whole dynamic unfold, the Knicks got at Portland, and they became intimidators, whether it was the defense in the lane or the strips or protecting, getting blocks. They did everything. Josh Hart coming back off of his injury showed a lot of tenacity. That he played in Portland prior to coming to New York, and he showed that like he hadn't lost a step. That type of intensity. And I think for Karl-Anthony Towns, when I do the cat versus dog, he needs to be more dog than cat. Cat's just the acronym for his name. But he needs to be more dog because when we see him locked in, we see him tenacious, we see him invigorated, inspired to play defense, and just playing with just some heart and grind, the muddy type of basketball that is required to play in New York. When we've seen that from Karl-Anthony Towns, he's looked virtually unstoppable, and so did the Knicks. So perhaps the message was clear. Maybe Mike Brown was saying, hey, if you want to be out on this time on the floor in the fourth quarter in meaningful minutes, then you got to get your head out the cavity, and start looking at what you need to do as far as making sure that you contribute to this team in more than one way. This whole offense, the one thing that's always nerving to me as a fan of the game for so long is the idea of specialists. A specialist to me is just a terrible way of overpaying someone for one aspect of the game. Whereas when we watched the 80s and the 90s, it was required that you play basketball. And that was an all-around game as much as possible. Obviously there's going to be talent limits and there's going to be an inability for some people are just going to be at a different echelon. Nobody's asking someone to be Jordan. Nobody's asking someone to be Larry Bird or LeBron James. We're saying the fundamental of the game is still the same thing. They work. So you have to defend or help defend or show strong on defense. We've seen Brown ask out of Tyler Kolek, and Tyler Kolek has come out and given an emphasis on the physicality. He hits big dudes. He's the smallest dude on the floor outside of maybe Miles McBride, but he hits guys. He's like, I'm here. I'm here. He chirps at guys and he lets them know that you're going to feel me during the game. And we've seen him in certain instances even stand up guys that are 7 foot tall by making just a simple play of showing some physicality on the other end and saying, you're not going to post me. I'm going to actually make sure that you know that I'm present and that I'm a danger to you, to not only your legs and your kneecaps, but they're actually making a play that will limit you from being dominant. That's how you play basketball. It should be an overall game, not just one specific side. The one thing that I did notice with Jalen Brunson the other night was he did play. Denny Avia went into the lane and tried to stand him up, and that type of resistance that Brunson gave is what he should give all the time. He's not a skinny guy. He's got a lot of girth to him. He's strong. Granted, we're not asking him to have great lateral quickness because physically he just does not have that. But you do have the ability to kind of do the Mike Tyson thing, as I would say, the greatest quote, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. You have the ability to punch back, just to show that you're there. These guys are not, we're not in the 80s and 90s where physicality was just on a whole different level. You can kind of, snatch these guys' hearts a little bit just by simply giving them a little bit of a nudge or a little bit of a push. We've seen even with Wembanyama, as big as he is, we've seen when the physical part of the game comes to him, he struggles with it, and he lets you know that he doesn't like that. So, Jalen Brunson, great player. I mean, I really never have many complaints about him at all. Love that he's a Knick, but the same tenacity he showed against Denny Avia is the same tenacity we need him to move forward with in order to be great as a team. But also it sends a message to Karl-Anthony Towns that you need to show that same adversity towards a player trying to actually get in the lane because they're hunting those two guys. The two most hunted guys on the Knicks is Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. So when they can't show any resistance, barbecue chicken, cookie baked in the oven too long, we're done. As I say, minute rice, you're cooked. So I think that's something that Karl-Anthony Towns, we'll see tonight. They play in Sacramento. Sacramento's not a team with a center. I think Sabonis is out. So you have an opportunity to come in and show great physicality because your resistance now is Precious Achiuwa, and a few of the other guys. So it behooves you to come out with that same, intensity that we've seen from the Knicks ending that game and just bring that part of your game. And I think you'll be perfectly fine. But like I said, debate is still up. Cat versus dog. We don't know what he is, but let's hope so that it's more dog than cat coming out. Just wanted to talk also about another dog. I'm bringing the whole dog thing. It's going to go Doberman 1, which is OG Anunoby. We've seen OG Anunoby, who I claim to be probably the most important Knick on the Knicks. I think when we look at a lot of things, I'm going to address once again about offense. We are probably surprised, and maybe OG Anunoby's even surprised about the offense that he's been able. I mean, he'll probably tell you something different, but we've been pleasantly surprised by his development. We've seen him have a great showing from the arc, or at least from the corners. He's nailing three-point shots. He's showing some agility off the bounce. He's not falling like life alert anymore when he goes to the basket. So we've seen him work on probably his core a little bit. He's gotten a little bit stronger. You wouldn't think he needed to get stronger looking at how his physical makeup. He looks like a complete athlete out there. But we've noticed over, the years he's been here that he's been a little bit clunky and clumsy, always falling. But this year we've seen a little different with him. We've seen him actually finish at the rim. We've seen him having worked with Dirk Nowitzki at some level to get that shot extremely consistent to the point that when he lets it fly, I think it's going in, most of the time. And he's proven to be a great piece since he arrived. The trajectory of the Knicks changed. I think he won 76% of our games with OG Anunoby in the lineup. So very important guy. And his overall game, I like to address, is a reason why I think he's one of the best, maybe the second best player on the Knicks. Because we're not talking just about the offense. I always said you got to be a well-rounded basketball player. And we've noticed that when he's engaged on defense and he's clicking on offense, and he just can give you that extra guy that can slash to the rim, something the Knicks don't have a lot of, the dynamic of the Knicks completely changed. And we saw that to finish out the game on versus Portland. He's just a beast because when he's locked in, you're talking a guy who can, within a little short span, can get you three steals. He hit back-to-back buckets from the wings area from three. He gave you it all. He hit his free throws. Probably the most important player, I think, probably on the Knicks moving forward. I think when you get into the context, if you're saying at the end of the season, the Knicks are the NBA champions, I think you have to look at OG Anunoby and know that he was probably the reason why you won that title. Because I think when he stays within the context of what he's great at doing, that he doesn't overplay as far as with his dribble, which is something that he's not great at. I think when he stays in that context and the rest of the Knicks are actually doing their jobs, I think you have one of the best two-way players, period. He's an all-star caliber player this year. And hopefully, he gets the nod this year as far as being an all-star, but extremely important player. A lot of the slack got picked up. Like I said, Karl-Anthony Towns has not been Karl-Anthony Towns all season. So when you look at a guy like OG Anunoby, he's filled in a lot of the blanks in that starting lineup. If not for him during parts of the season, you got to ask yourself, where would the Knicks even be? Because he's played some important minutes in a strong personal important role on his team, delivering all-around game. And I think it's hilarious when we think back on 2 seasons ago under Tom Thibodeau. We didn't think OG Anunoby could rebound. Now we've had games where he's been engaged and he'll get you double-digit rebounds. just an all-around talent. I know what people were worried about the contract initially, the injury history we obviously worried about, but that's the Knicks being Knicks fans. We've always been worried about injuries because we know what the luck of the Nick Irish can be like sometimes where, what can happen usually happens to us. But he's proven to be pretty durable this year. They're going to need him. If Carlton Towns is going to be wishy-washy, then we definitely need OG Anunoby to actually come in and be somewhat of a savior to the offense and the defense because I have no problem with him being like a small ball five even in certain lineups, maybe in the closeout games because you're going to need some defense, some serious defense once you know that, like I said, Brunson's not the best first front of the line player. So all of that's going to fall on the back end of the defense. Whatever's getting into the lane, whatever's getting at the rim, that's where you need some real dogs back there. And pun intended on the theme of tonight's show, but you do need those dogs out there to actually give you that kind of tenacity and grit. So shout out to OG Anunoby, great thing. Keep it up. Hopefully we stay healthy. That'd be a great thing as well. But right now, when you look back, RJ Barrett's having a fantastic season with the Toronto Raptors, albeit I think he's injured now. And we know Emmanuel Quickley, it's not a decent season, although they're looking to seemingly move off of him. Knicks made good on this trade. I mean, I think if you had pulled us back in the day, two of our garden favorites, two of our young talents, we always have this thing about not wanting to trade away our youth and our draft picks, but this paid off. I don't know who made the call. We're going to say it's Leon Rose. However, he's proven to be extremely right with OG Anunoby. He's just given us everything you could ask for from that position and then some, and he affects winning. And what you need always on a team, especially our team, is winners. We need guys with high IQs and the ability to win, but even more so to compete. Competing is huge in New York. If you don't believe it, I'm going to discuss in a little while about two guys that they're not competing. And that's one of the reasons why they're receiving a lot of the ridicule and catching flack. But we'll move forward to what I'm going to call is the second Doberman 2, which is Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges, very unique guy. I think if you had to poll most people when the draft was coming up and we was delving into the Kevin Knox sweepstakes, there were certain people that didn't want Mikal Bridges. But the one thing that you'll know about Mikal Bridges is he's always been he's a pro. He's going to be a pros pro. I think we're still looking for which version of Mikal we'll get every night. A lot of times we've seen Phoenix Mikal, the guy who was runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, the guy who almost won MVP in the finals. Had Phoenix been able to hold on against Milwaukee, he was the star in Game 2 of that series, so he was definitely lining up to probably win MVP of the finals. Hell of a player, I think sometimes what happens with Mikal Bridges is we kind of get lost he gets lost on the floor. There's times where, last show I joked about his celly, he does the whole bobblehead thing and then he does the nosebleed thing, which to me is kind of silly antics on his behalf because I just don't think he's that kind of player to warrant showing up and showing up another player or whatever you want to do it. His cachet on the floor is not to that level. However, I think the one thing that I would love to see from him is a lot of the stuff that he was capable of doing. But I think we're noticing also, and the rumor was out prior to him coming to the Knicks, and that was that his pick and roll defense had fell off. I think we're starting to see that you probably can't give Mikal Bridges that assignment of going out and guarding that guy, whoever that guy is on the other team, that guy believing that he's going to be a shutdown defender. OG Anunoby is very capable of doing that. He goes out there and he can shut down. We saw him play Kawhi Leonard versus the Clippers. Kawhi was lit, and coming into the Garden, he was on a hell of a roll. So when you saw a guy like OG Anunoby suddenly lock in on him, we heard no more from Kawhi Leonard. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you notice what numbers he was putting up and then look at what he actually did in the Garden, two totally different players. I'm going to give a lot of credit to OG Anunoby for, putting it, cutting off the water. But Mikal Bridges, we do look for him to be something. I think we see bits and fragments of him some days, shooting the lights out with three. And then sometimes we see him attacking the basket. And then there's other times where like he went and got a hot dog at the stand. We're like, now Mikal coming back and he's eating the hot dog, putting mustard on it with his little bobble move. He's an important piece. When we look at what the Knicks invested in him, had to invest in him in order to get him. I mean, it's to no doing of his own, but we have to look at it with the fact that was the cost to be the boss of Mikal Bridges. Knicks gave up a lot of draft picks. I know people kind of go back and forth with whether or not he deserved it or, should we have kept him? Should we go in another direction? It's the New York Knicks for me. I mean, when I think about Mikal Bridges or any other guy that would have came here, it would have cost the Knicks everything. It doesn't matter. It's just what the tax is in New York. Nobody wants this team to be relevant. If you don't believe it, just look at all the times when the Knicks start falling apart or they have a little skid. Everybody chimes in. Everybody talks about who's disgruntled and what they need to do that's different, or this player's not special. He's too short. He's too slow. Blah, 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 blah. He's not as good. How many times we're going to hear about Jalen Brunson having to reprove himself? He was on the Dallas Mavericks. Nobody would ever say Jalen Brunson needs to improve himself. They'd be like, they got a special talent. So it comes with the territory, with the Knicks tax and the Knicks criticism. Knicks for clicks is a real thing. However, I do believe that we do need Mikal Bridges to actually show up. I think it's very important coming down the stretch that he starts to put his stamp on this team as well. When he's a scorer, he has the ability to score. I think he has a better ability to score than OG Anunoby. He actually has an off-the-bounce game. He can play from the perimeter. He can slice when need be. Just we have not seen enough of that unless it's Tyler Kolek in the actual lineup feeding him during these times. So I don't know. I mean, do we ask Jalen Brunson to start being more of a distributor? He had 8 assists in the last game. Great numbers, 8 assists. Do we need him to give out more assists, or do we need maybe Mikal to be more aggressive? I think that's a good point. I, for one, never thought that the Knicks players, when they brought in those 2 wing guys, that they were going to be subjects of offense. I always thought that they were going to be subjects of being great defenders. Maybe we oversold in our minds what Mikal can bring. Do we kind of tamp those thoughts out of thinking that he should be a 25-point scorer, get two steals, 4 boards? Probably not in his bag. I'm starting to notice that more often. However, what we did see down the stretch is the importance of when he's present and when he shows the aggression that we need. The Knicks can be a juggernaut and a hell of a team to try to stop, because you have all kind of dynamics going on with the scoring between him and Brunson and a guy Josh Hart, which we're going to talk about in a little bit also. When those guys can scramble and create the chaos on the floor on both ends, Knicks are a very dangerous and unpredictable team that nobody probably wants to face when you have all the things locked in and going on. So my wish is that Mikal, whatever, don't be passive. I think sometimes he gets wrapped up in being just a great teammate, but we need you just to be the great version of what you are and be aggressive, because that's going to be good enough. That's going to be good enough for a lot of wins in this league and definitely come playoff time. But what we've seen, though, we got to give him credit where it's due. Mikal has had a subpar first year, regular season. Postseason came along, and the dude clicked. And we're not winning. We're not getting to the Eastern Conference Finals without Mikal Bridges. Clearly, he woke up in Boston in such a beast way, with 2 of maybe the best and biggest steals, blocks, whatever you want to call them. They call them stocks, I think that's what they call them. Two of the biggest ones when you look at it from that perspective in Knicks history, my history of knowing the Knicks. Those were 2 gigantic back-to-back stops in a hostile environment, because it don't count until it gets into the playoffs, as far as I'm concerned. Once I would say regular season, you make your name. Postseason is where you make your fame. And when you look at that aspect, Mikal Bridges became famous in the postseason. So maybe are we wanting that same thing to trickle over? Of course, we'd love to see the consistency because as Knicks fans, we want to win every game. I don't think no Knicks fan wants to see one game losing streak, let alone 3 or 4. But the results, I like watching what we are doing now. Like I'm not too wrapped up in the record and where we stand per se, as much as I want to see how we're performing and gelling, because I think that's the key thing. Can you gel extremely well together and show that as a unit, you guys can go on the road and carry it? Because you're winning on the road. Granted, if you have home court advantage throughout the playoffs, you have to absolutely just maintain your home court. But chances are somebody's going to win on your court at some point. So you got to make sure that what you're doing at home, it can travel. And that's the one thing I would love to see, the consistency from Mikal Bridges and from this whole squad in general, is that take the circus on the road and still make it the same show, because that's what's very important moving forward. So let me move on to this guy here. I had to look up actually this dog because I'm calling it Deuce Schnauzer. Everybody doesn't know what a Schnauzer is. Schnauzer is a very small dog, but with a lot of tenacity, a lot of fight. When looking at Deuce McBride, I mean, I think when there was a story to be told, I mean, usually the thought pattern when it comes to winning a championship is that usually a drafted player is on that team. Someone you drafted participated on that team, and they help you win a title. Usually it's the top-notch players. It's the number 1 picks, the number 5 picks. The lottery picks is where it usually is associated with. However, when we look at a guy, when we talk about building talent on the Knicks, we've talked for so long about developing the youth, drafting a player and keeping him and extending him. This is what we've all pined for as Knicks fans. We've wanted as Knicks fans, is this organic build from the ground up. Granted, it didn't all work out that way. We did have, like I said, R.J. Barrett. We had Manuel Quickley, Mitchell Robinson being the longest tenured Knick. I know that sounds crazy for most people. And we've seen, obviously, Manuel Quickley. We've seen Quentin Grimes. The list goes on and on with guys that Obi Toppin being another. We've seen these guys come in. We've seen somewhat development, but we never see them reach a peak. We never saw the peak performance from these guys. So we're always going to probably wonder. You can have the question marks if you wish to wonder how good could they have been in a Knicks uniform. I mean, I think that's a fair question. Many people were mad when Emmanuel Quickley left because they saw what they believed was this high level of potential. Like, oh, who are we going to replace him with? They were more fearful of him going to another team and becoming this elite point guard. I never saw that in him, to be very honest. I mean, I never just saw that in him. I thought he was a solid backup at best. I never saw him as the starter, but hey, everybody has their opinion about certain players. Needless to say, we all probably wanted to see what these guys can be in our uniform. We saw a little bit with Kristaps Porzingis. KP, aside from the injuries, we saw him start to become a talent on the Knicks. We're like, wow, where can he go? Well, your eyes get a little bit saucer sized and you start thinking that, wow, this could be something extremely great. We might have one of our own. We've never really saw that. From all the players I just mentioned, we saw them exit. So we look towards what we've been really great at doing, which is the second round has been seemingly a great thing for the New York Knicks. And I'm more than sure when we looked during that draft, the Deuce McBride draft, I think most people probably saw a guy who's going to be probably a good defender because it was under Tom Thibodeau. So we're like, well, he probably can defend. We know he's in West Virginia. That was his talent. He's a hard-nosed defender, undersized, unfortunately. So I think the Knicks, the Knicks fan base probably said, well, he might be a serviceable guard. Maybe of the Charlie Ward nature, I guess, can give you some defense, maybe play a little point guard, etc. We watched him, go spend a lot of time in the G League. He wrecked the G League. He come back with these fantastic numbers. Then he comes back into the regular rotation, part-time. We never saw that. what he was doing in the G League, it just never translated to the regular team. So go back to the G League. We saw him keep putting in his work, and lo and behold, we then saw him come around where he started getting a little bit of minutes under Tom Thibodeau. You figured that that's the kind of player Tom Thibodeau would like, so you figured Deuce McBride would definitely start to see some minutes. But nothing really too crazy. He still was being monitored, still being worked on. You kind of saw a little bit of the development happen, but nothing insanely great. But it shows when opportunity knocks, you got to open the door. When Emmanuel quickly was traded, the Knicks immediately extended McBride. That was like the big thing. So when you looked at that, you're like, wow, this is a great opportunity for Deuce. I don't think nobody was like, oh God, we got Deuce. I think most people were like, well, it's a whatever move. We'll keep somebody that can give you some rotation minutes here and there, be a backup, nothing special. Well, nobody told Miles Deuce McBride, because, man, since that extension, on the best deal probably in the Knicks' history of having a great deal contract-wise, we are now probably sitting with the best three-point shooter in the game. And I know Steph Curry. I know what everybody's going to say. Oh, these guys are marksmen. We're talking about marksmen. We're talking about a guy who was a second rounder, who was on the cheapest contract probably in the league for value-wise. And we've seen this guy come out. And I don't know about everyone, but I think most people, whether it's traveling in an arena or whether it's at the Garden, when that ball goes up, you hear that deuce, you hear that because everybody knows that damn ball might go in more than it's going to go out. He's just been friggin' lights out. He comes back off a little bit of an injury and he still lights out. He is so important to the New York Knicks. I know there's going to come a time where the Knicks have to make a major decision come off season. They have two guys that are pending free agents in Mitchell Robinson and Deuce McBride. And I'm going to tell people I would not want to be Leon Rose making that decision. However, given what we're seeing from Miles McBride, because the ceiling's not even topped out yet, we don't know what more he can add to his game. But the one thing we do know is that he's been so damn solid coming off the bench. I'm expecting everything he throws up to go in. I think he's expecting everything to go in. I think his teammates expecting to go in. And on top of that, you got a guy who's just a hellified defender. I think Eric Holzman was the guy who said that he reminded him of Derek Fisher a lot. Derek was a undersized two-guard, very capable defender, tough, gritty guy. Obviously hit some of the biggest shots for the Lakers and for other teams that he's been on. Keep him away from your girlfriend, but we knew what he was capable of doing on the actual floor. He's part of that Laker tribe where they won those titles with Kobe and Shaq. Wasn't a great coach for the Knicks, but we'll just move on from that. But however, Miles McBride has a lot of that makeup about him, that toughness, that seriousness on the floor, that compete on the floor. He has that compete gene. Very athletic also. I don't think that people notice that much more about him, but they're so enamored with the shot. But when he develops a little bit more off the bounce game, or he gets a little wiggle to his game as far as the dribble package, if it's me and I'm the Knicks, I'm signing him and I'm letting Mitch walk. Because when you got a player locked in and dedicated to being great, and they're dedicated, their work ethic is bar none, clearly the dude who sleeps, eats basketball. He's a high character player. I just don't think you can give that guy up, because there's another level he can possibly go to. And I wouldn't want to see that happen on another team, because I was thinking the other night watching the Oklahoma City Thunder, I said, man, if Deuce McBride was on there, I don't think that they'd be beatable. I don't think nobody would beat them, simply because I think Deuce is that important of a cog on a championship level team. I don't think you can let him go. I think there's an argument to give him even more minutes sometimes, because when you think about what he brings, and it's everything New York. It's everything New York. High character guy too. You don't got to worry about no off-court crap with him. He's just a baller, and a family dude, and clearly locked in I think it's a great thing to see a New York Knick get developed, and he's one of ours. And I would love if the Knick fans definitely they will show him appreciation. We hear the deuce, but I hope that the organization does the same thing in return and allow him to stay a Knick for his career, because that's not the worst thing in the world to have Deuce McBride knocking down those types of shots at a heavy clip. I think at one point he's shooting like 65% from three. That's just ridiculous on his return. So the dude is locked and loaded, and I think you'll hear during the playoffs that guy won you some games with his shooting. That's for sure. Let me transition to this guy. I'm going to call him the German Hart Shepherd, because, I think sometimes we talk about flowers all the time, I don't know. Maybe we need to, maybe he needs an edible arrangement with some, what is it candy he eats? Mike and Ike's, is that what he eat or whatever? Yeah, Josh Hart, man. We've talked about Josh Hart. There's been slander about Josh Hart. When you think about it from Knicks fans, we saw the slander of what he can't do. We hear the slander about his overuse under Tom Thibodeau. We've heard the slander the guy can't knock down a shot. Okay, I guess it's all fair if you want. All's fair in love and war. In that sense, I think it's just Knicks fans being Knicks fans. But one thing that you can always say that you've noticed from the start when Josh Hart entered into a New York Knicks arena and put on that uniform, the team has never been the same since he got here. The minute he arrived, he brought everything that any Knicks fan with a grain of sense and who has been around long enough know that he brought something that was so missing on this team and from this franchise. And the namesake keeps ringing back and forth. It's a great cliche, but he brought heart. But I'm going to use a term more so that people tend to use now. He put a damn battery in the back of the Knicks. For all those soft years, all those not knowing what you were going to get from a player, all that, are they going to bring it every night? Things we yearn from wanting to see from our Knicks players. That toughness, that lunch pail, that Anthony Mason type, that Oakley type, that John Starks type, those dudes that you just know that you're going to have to kill them. You're going to have to kill them to stop them, because they're going to give you every damn thing on the floor. Their sweat equity will never be questioned. Their toughness won't be questioned. What you'll see is a product of a guy who just gives a hit about basketball and about winning at any cost. It doesn't matter to Josh Hart whether he scored 5 points and he has to get 30 rebounds. He's going to do his damnedest, and he's going to check the boxes brilliantly. I think the thing that we've seen this year, because he heard the criticism in the offseason. I think he himself said that he's surprised he wasn't traded for a New York slice, a $1 slice, because let's face it, people didn't like him. They tagged him as a huge reason why we lost series against teams like the Pacers. We've heard about Josh Hart can't shoot. Josh Hart was exhausted, which I never understood that. Everybody knew why he was exhausted. Tom Thibodeau, ran him like a ball tire. That's literally what it was. Guys like Josh Hart don't ask to be taken out of series and replaced by one of his coworkers. He asked that reason because he too knew he had nothing left. Albeit he would have never blamed Thibodeau. In fact, he defended him. There was reasons why Josh Hart fell off during the postseason, because he left every damn thing on the floor during the regular season. That's exactly what it is. So when we move forward and look at what we have now in front of us, if anybody didn't think Josh Hart was valuable, I think they need to go look at the last 15 games that dude played. The Knicks are 12-3. Mike Brown had to his own admission, had to defer to his staff, who came to him and said, I don't know what the hell else you're going to do the rest of the season, but you need to put Josh Hart back in the starting lineup. And I'm going to sure everybody who's a Knicks fan was like, they thought that all these guys were brought here so Josh can go to the bench. That was the key thing, that who was ever going to start, it was to move Josh to the bench. We've asked, people wanted Deuce to start. This is what you've heard most of the time. Start these guys and put Josh on the bench and use him as a six man. He's the ultimate six man. Which, granted, when he came to the Knicks, that was his role. He's been a guy who came off the bench for a lot of years in this league. You knew what he could bring as far as rebounding, but the rest of his game kind of was like Rodman made him like Rodman, literally, like you are a specialist and kind of stay in your lane. You're coming in to bring, a lot of energy, and you're here to rebound the basketball at a high clip and get out and, do all the dirty work. What we're seeing now is a guy who's, I guess he'd be old dirty bastard, because the ODB, the dirty work, and this dude's a bastard on the offensive end now too. Josh Hart has a jump shot. So much that he told while in Portland, he's like, well, they sagged off of me, so I had to make them pay for it. The shot. My joke has been, if we know a broken finger would have made Josh Hart shoot better, we should have broke his finger 2 years ago, because the dude is lights out. He's just shooting the hell out of the ball with great confidence. A guy who was very hesitant during some stretches we saw, willing to pass. His confidence waned a lot during the games and during series as far as having to shoot. We saw him have greater success actually on catch and shoots or desperation shots. He seems to flourish in those moments. But now we're seeing that during kickouts, this dude pulls up and the shot wet. He got a little Niagara in him now. The Knicks are winning because of Josh Hart. I know you can point to anything else on the floor. The numbers don't lie. I think the thing that goes unnoticed by most Knicks fans sometimes when you isolate one player, but you have to ask yourself, how does that player work with your best player? Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson were meant to play basketball together. The friendship we know about, but the friendship's on the court too. There's a kinship on the court. Brunson functions better with Josh. I think when you see him in the lineup, how can you not notice it? Some of the struggles that Brunson has, he trusts Josh Hart. There's a trust factor that goes on, and there's also just this unwritten thing or a telepathic thing that they have where they know what they're doing on the court together. And you see them play, and they're super engaged. They're super engaged. They have a brotherhood. Obviously, we saw a little bit with both Hart, and we saw with Dante DiVincenzo last season, where those guys, or the season they were together. We saw the unification of the Nova guys, and we were hoping Mikal would be the other piece to come in, and it would have been the whole collective. But we do see, while Josh Hart's on the floor with Jalen Brunson, this team is just different. He does all the dirty work, but now he's shooting the three-point shot. We always know he can finish at a high clip at the rim. I think he's arguably one of the best. I think he's top 2, top 3 downhill drivers. We're talking Giannis. Probably LeBron still does it at a great clip. Man, after that, I don't got too many people. Maybe Russell Westbrook, but he doesn't finish as good. We're talking about guys who just finish at the rim and run a fast break with relentlessness, and they finish. Josh Hart is one of those ones. So when Knicks fans look back, I think you should start appreciating some of the talent you guys got out there. Josh Hart is the reason why we're where we are. Without him in the lineup, just look at the record. When he's not playing, he's not starting. During this stretch, did the Knicks not struggle? Yes, they're 5-5 in the last 10 games. So a guy who was inserted in there was well above 500 because he was 12-3. So now the Knicks are 5-5. They come back, and lo and behold, Josh is back. You win the first game, he's back. And by a lot of his effort, obviously, we saw the steal and just the commitment to scramble and get that layup at all costs. He was not going to not get that layup. That's just what you know about when he's on the floor. He's going to leave everything out on the floor, winded. You're going to have to deliver a kill shot. Josh Hart is not going anywhere. And Knicks fans, I just pray that you learn to appreciate your talent before it's gone, because as somebody who's 50-plus years old, you don't get to see this too often in a New York Knicks uniform. This team is something beautiful to watch, and it's definitely something that you need to pay attention to as far as respect-wise. Josh Hart, big up to you. One of my favorite Knicks all times, and gotta love what you bring, bro. And I appreciate you. Nobody else appreciates New York. I do, that's for sure. All right, I'm going to wrap up the show in a few, but I just wanted to discuss a little play on words here. I'm going to talk about the two French poodles. Everybody knows when we talk about anything French in New York, other than French fry, there's always going to be some controversy, especially when it's in Madison Square Garden. You know, where do we start? Frederick Weiss? Want to start there over on our test? We can always go there. Where else we want to go? You want to go? Evan Fournier didn't work, although I like Evan. Didn't work. That worked. And we know that the notorious hive is Frank Ntilikina. Another hive. Had his own hive. The dude was beloved. He was a Knicks legend, and he never really kind of panned out, as we know. So, needless to say, nothing French works in New York. We have a nice large sample size of French people coming into New York. No French, I love French people. I don't care about that. But the basketball-wise, it's just not a good look. So we go into this offseason. Well, let's start before the offseason, because the year prior to that, the Knicks drafted Pacome Dadier, a French prospect. You know, very raw talent. I think everybody did the Scooby-Doo dog quoting. Nobody knew who the hell he was when they drafted him with the last pick in the draft. So you start doing your homework. You know, obviously, when you're a nerd about this game, you start looking at footage, and you're like, I don't see what's special about him. You know, we know that the potential of what he physically can become. You know, he could be a tall, lengthy, small forward. You know, wing player, so to say. You know, we saw the physical gifts that could possibly come with drafting a guy, developing in a guy like Pacome Dadier, you know, very young still. You know, although I don't like that whole young thing all the time. Like when you start talking about, oh, he's too young. Basketball is basketball. You either see it or it's not there. That's it. You either see it or it's not there. You know, we can fluff it, make it cute, but there should be some semblance of something you see that shows why that person is a first-round talent, why they are a professional basketball player in this league, and why they earn a huge check by playing that sport. This whole idea about you waiting and seeing, I mean, who wants to wait and see anything? I mean, people are waiting for Marvel movies to come out. They have a lot of anxiety and anxiousness waiting for that. Nobody wants to wait and see. They want to see the little clips on YouTube or the sneak trailers or leaked information. That's what you look for now. We don't have the patience or to wait for anything. You know, we want to see something. You know, when Pacome Dadier was drafted, you know, you go into summer league, you're waiting to see stuff there from him. You know, maybe that doesn't work out so well. You might say, oh, well, I see he moves his feet well. All right, that's what I said. I thought he can get in front of guys. You know, maybe he can show the potential of defense. Yeah, but that's just one aspect of the game. Can you do more than that? You know, part of basketball is being able to dribble, obviously, being able to shoot, a whole bunch of different dynamics. So you look to see kind of something in there. Is your athleticism there? You know, the one thing that I noticed was the dude, he just shoots threes. That's all he wants to do, which Kevin Knox. That's what that reminded me of was, you know, that's what Kevin Knox did. You know, he was one of those guys that launched threes. He didn't take, you saw a little glimpse at one point. He dunked in Summer League and you never saw him dunk again. You know, he fast break on it. You never saw this guy. This guy never existed again. So we look at Pacome Dadier and you're waiting for me personally, I'm waiting for that one thing I see and go, maybe that's it. That's why they got the guy. He's got this potential to show. So we look at him as obviously a project. He probably should have been sent overseas, but he wanted to stay over in the States and develop his game. I've just not seen it. Personally, for me, I've not seen it. I've not seen the thing that people are enamored about with him or why he was worth that draft pick. We've seen it from Kolek. Kolek was not too far after him, and he fell in the second round. And we've seen glimpses of Tyler's game. Granted, Tyler played, you know, Marquette. He had 4 years of experience, so I can see why he should be more developed. However, like I said, you're waiting for the glimpse of something. So we move forward. We're in year, 2? You know, we've seen other guys. McCullough comes into the games. He shows some greatness. We've seen We've seen, obviously, Tyler Kolek's project has taken off very well. We've seen he's become a favorite of a lot of people. I think what threw me was this, is that the Knicks obviously drafted rookies. And the minute I saw Diawara, another French guy, actually, he's not just a fry, he's a baguette, I guess. We saw Diawara come in, and he's earned minutes. This guy's showing you something. He's had great showings. He hasn't looked lost in the sauce. He looks like he can give you something. And you see the potential. That's the thing. You see the potential on the floor. The guy can dribble the ball. He's like 6'8", 6'9", I guess. He can dribble. He's shown he can defend. He's shown he can hit three-point shots. He's shown an off-the-bounce move. He's shown you something. We've got a damn glance at Diawara's game. Pacome Dadier, not even getting the minutes. He's not even showing. The sun. What he said, the sun shines on the dog's ass every once in a while. Well, this puppy ain't got no sunshine. We ain't seen nothing on his ass yet because he has not shown us one iota of anything that constitutes for me to believe that this is something that you hold on to and develop. Because where's the development at? We have not seen anything. We have not seen a glitch on the radar from this guy yet. So we can believe, we can wait and see or whatever. All right. But we move forward to this past offseason. The Knicks decided to go French again. We had Yabusele came in. Guy known for dunking on LeBron in the Olympics. Played in Philly last year. He was originally drafted by Boston, if I'm not mistaken. Went overseas, played in the French league. Obviously, then he comes over here and he signs with Philadelphia. Had a great, solid first year with Philly. Many believe that he was putting up those numbers on a bad team. Kind of thinking now maybe that might be a lot more true than false. Needless to say, his tenure here as a Knick, he picked, I think the mid-level exception is what he picked up because the Knicks don't got that much damn money. And he was the player they decided to say, we're going to tag him because we believe that he could be a difference maker come playoff time, that he can offer something at that 4-5 position, to kind of relieve Towns if need be and help with Mitch if need be. I think we had a high expectation that at least that he would bring the physicality that we believed he would bring. And this dude, I don't know, he came in to me, albeit he claims he's in shape. I just think he's in the shape of a round circle. He is definitely not shown that he's willing to, trim the fat, so to say, to use an old school term. He's heavy. I think he's been heavy D and the boys for the longest time since he's been here. And I think it's been noted that, maybe he's trying to acclimate. He has a weight problem. And I think that he didn't wait to eat and he got on the damn floor. And I think because of that, I think we're seeing him struggle so much on offense and to kind of adjust to the speed of the game and what he's being asked to do as far as from the schemes from Mike Brown. He's also looked dejected. He looks non-connected to the game. He's not engaged. He looks lost on the floor, except for an occasional three-point shot is what you might see him hit. But he ain't offered damn anything. It's just complete sausages. There's nothing. He's providing nothing as far as I'm concerned to the Knicks other than taking up a roster spot that needs to go to someone else. So why I'm mentioning this to be the two French poodles is that we're now hearing the rumors about moves being potentially made by the Knicks, and those moves will involve those two guys. Probably come before the trade deadline. Yabusele and Pacome Dadier will be part of some package to get off of that contract and to bring in a serviceable player. So I'm just going to go through some quick names that we're hearing rumors on, just to give a little touch on them. This one came up earlier today. Ayo, that's what he worked great in New York. This guy's name, Ayo Dasamunu, I guess Dasamu, Chicago Bulls player. I think he played for Illinois. I think in college, if I'm not mistaken. Hometown boy. He's got a good game. He's a good defender. Can shoot the lights. He's actually a pretty good three-point shooter. Guess he's just kind of lost in the mix there. Chicago's notorious for being cheap, so perhaps he's one of those guys that they don't want to pay because they're famous for that. He's a wing type. I think he's 6'5". Could offer us a lot of different aspects of the game, being able to score, being able to do a little distribution, being able to defend, which I think is the huge thing that we need to have at least another wing type talent that can give us some length and some tenacity on ball defense and all that stuff. So, I mean, looking at that, I think that's a pretty decent move to think about. If you're the New York Knicks, guys, let me know, or the fans, let me know, I should say, what you think about that name. Another one being mentioned also is Keon Ellis. Keon Ellis is from the Sacramento Kings. Not shooting the ball very well. Known for his defense. He's having a down season. Really down season. I think his numbers are really suffering. He's kind of buried on the depth of Sacramento. Sacramento has a lot of depth, a lot of extra unnecessary in Sacramento. That's another story in itself. However, they say that he may be available for the Knicks to try to get. I don't know. I mean, you need some sort of shooting still. I don't like when I see guys that have these subpar shooting numbers. I mean, that's like playing 4-on-5 on the floor. You can't space. You can't deliver. Nobody has time to wait for you to actually get that going. And hopefully, and if he's a volume shooter, that makes it even worse. So another name being mentioned also in this is the Knicks, Nick Richards. I think he's been connected to the Knicks before. He's from the Phoenix Suns, if I'm not mistaken. The Knicks have supposedly knocked on the door. I believe he's a center. I think he might have been in Charlotte at one point. I think the Knicks kicked the tires on him before. He ends up in Phoenix. Phoenix is playing pretty well right now, so maybe they're not looking to get off of him. So we'll see about that. Let me know what you think about him. Another guy being mentioned is San Antonio's Jeremy Sohan. He's fallen out the rotation in Sacramento. In San Antonio. He's the guy with all the different color hairs. He's the Dennis Rodman. I think he wears number 10 also. He was thought to be the defender type coming into the league. Doesn't shoot the ball great. I mean, his numbers, his three-point shot is never existed, basically. I think he's 27%. That's not going to really cut it. If you're looking for a guy who you bring in maybe to add a body on defense, to kind of give you some rebounding, kind of push the ball in the pace, he might be serviceable. This is not a person that can demand a lot of minutes. If he was to arrive here, so you don't got to worry about playing the carousel of minutes. If he's willing to be a good role player, he can offer quite a bit of different things for the Knicks outside of he can't score like that. So, I mean, those are things that might suffer if you bring him in. But I just think the Knicks need some depth to be able to throw, just in case, break glass kind of players where they can provide you with a little bit of everything just in case, a player goes down and gets injured. I don't know if he would be a long-term solution, but that's something to think about. But this guy right here has been the topic of discussion. And that's, they call him GTA. That's Grand Theft Alvarado. I think he's from Brooklyn. Anybody correct me? Brooklyn? I think he's from Brooklyn. What did he say? This guy has probably every bit of the things that New York Knicks fans will absolutely go crazy over if he was to be brought in here. Obviously, the big question is he's an undersized guard. That's not the question. I shouldn't say that that's a question about him because he's undersized, meaning that we have a bunch of guards, another guard. That's what we'd be adding is another guard. And I think most people would probably want on their wish list a center or a wing player. But I've always wondered, when you think about the one thing you can never measure, and going back to the guy I just mentioned before, his namesake, you can't measure heart in this league. When we look at a guy like Jalen Brunson, unassuming, most people say, that guy ain't a basketball player. We know what he is. Deuce McBride's another guy. When you look at him, undersized, what is he really going to do? He's a basketball player. When we look at Tyler Kolek, another undersized guy, and he's important because that's what a lot of people are complaining, like you're getting someone and maybe taking minutes from Tyler. But Tyler, another undersized guy with a lot of fight. He doesn't have the years, but he has a lot of fight in him. They won't get taken advantage on the floor. Now, I mentioned all those guys, and outside of Josh Hart, this guy might be the biggest dog in the league, pound for pound or whatever you want to call it. This dude flat out stands up guys. You talk about defense, you talk about tenacity and grit, playmaking ability, bringing that New York attitude. Clearly, he wants to be here. I wouldn't think when you're from New York, why would you not want to be in New York? You can't get a bacon, egg, and cheese out in New Orleans. That ain't gonna work that way. This guy is somebody when you're looking at the physical nature of him, you would think that maybe this won't work. But then you look at him actually trying to beat the hell out of a 7-foot center and actually getting his licks in. And the reason why he's suspended and not playing currently now is due to that, is that he doesn't back down. This dude is not going to back down. And I think when you talk about playoff basketball, you talk about guys like Marcus Smart, you talk about guys like Josh Hart. There's not a lot of tough guys in the league. And it would behoove you if you could have one of those tough guys in the league on your team, because you know what the hell you're going to get. You get the Derek White types. You know what Derek White's going to bring. He's going to bring a level of toughness. You get the Jrue Holiday types. They're going to bring a level of toughness. You know what you're going to get from them every night. There's going to be a damn dogfight in the middle of the yard, and they're going to win it. So when you look at Grand Theft Alvarado, also known as Jose Alvarado, the Knicks have had interest. We hear vaguely talk about it. This is not a new thing. This is an old thing. They have inquired about him, I think, in past seasons. And now currently the Knicks obviously are in need of adding a talent and subtracting a talent in Yabusele. The question with Alvarado is, what will it cost? Clearly you don't want to give up any of the good things you have on the Knicks. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but clearly you got to give up something to get something. Meaning, when I say good, I'm talking about a player. So perhaps this will be more of a draft compensation with a player, like a Yabusele and a Fakondadier, meaning that maybe the Knicks attach some second rounds. I'm not trading Deuce McBride for him. I'm not probably even trying to trade Tyler Kolek at this point. These guys are on tremendous contracts. I don't think you give those up just to give them up. However, you have to consider strongly Jose Alvarado. I don't think that you can not, given that we've seen what has happened. You have a team like San Antonio Spurs. You have a team like Oklahoma City. These are the teams you possibly will face come playoff time. What do they do? Stephon Castle is one of the best drivers of the ball. When you look at OKC, who's one of the best drivers of the ball? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. These are the guys you're going to face. Who's your opposition as a Knick? It's Jalen Brunson. Remember, we can go back a couple steps ago where I said there's a link between him not guarding great at the point of attack and Carl not guarding the rim. There's going to come a time where you have to make a business decision on one of those guys. And God forbid, say it's Jalen Brunson. Who are you going to put out there? McBride is a great point of attack defender, but you're going to need a wave of guys when you're facing a guy like Cade Cunningham. Look at him. Somebody's going to be in foul trouble. So you got to ask yourself, do you walk away from this guy because of his height and because of repetition of the position, I should say? Or do you say, give me the big damn dog in the yard. Give me the guy who's going to leave it all out there, and he's going to be willing to fight whoever you throw in any series, no matter how big or small. I don't think the Knicks have too many of those guys. I think McBride doesn't care. I think Josh Hart doesn't care. But you need somebody who don't give a damn. I don't think this dude gives one damn about who the opposition is. He's going to come out there fighting, and he is a tenacious defender. He's one of the best, if not maybe the best on-ball defender in the league. He plays with a grit. He has passing ability. He has a whole package. I think if you're going to give up a talent to get someone and knowing that you're giving up assets, I think when you look at like Ayo, he's a decent player. Maybe you might forfeit a little bit of your assets for him. But guys like Keon Ellis, Nick Richards, Jeremy Sohan, I don't think those dudes bite the apple. I think you got to have somebody from the apple. And I think Jose Alvarado will eat a rotten apple because that's what they call New York sometimes, the rotten apple. I think he's built to play here. I think he's one of those guys that you have to entertain, saying if you're going to make a trade, make it for someone that you know will be a difference maker. And every time the Knicks have made a trade, we've seen the difference makers. The Josh Hart trade, we thought we overpaid at one point, giving up what's his name? Well, that's a shame. He's out of the Cam Reddish. Cam Reddish, and we gave up a draft pick. And the question was, what is Josh going to bring? He brought winning. He brought tenacity. He brought grit and grind. Same thing when we saw midseason with Derrick Rose when Thibodeau was here. Midseason acquisitions have paid off for the Knicks because they shift the energy in the room, and they shift the energy and the tenacity and the ability to compete. So you have those guys coming in midseason. They change the trajectory of your team. We now have to look at who do you believe on that list will change the trajectory of this team? Who, if you insert in this lineup, is going to light up the garden? Who's going to push his teammates? Who's going to have an impact as soon as he hits the floor? If you believe that's Ayo, fine. I don't think that's him. Keon Ellis, I don't think that's him. Nick Richards, I damn sure don't think it's him. Jeremy Sohan, maybe with something to prove. He is an energy guy, maybe. For me, I think you got to entertain Jose Alvarado, even if it makes you smaller, because right now you have a guy in Yabusele, and you have a guy in Pacome Dadier who physically fit the bill. They are everything you want out of a physical specimen if you're building a player, whether it's for power forward or for a small forward. And they suck. They're not bringing you anything. I'd rather take the short guy giving you all on the floor than the big guy sitting there being aloof and not wanting to play hard. And I think that temperament will help the Knicks. So, like I said, I reeled off a few names. We'll know more, obviously, in the coming weeks as the draft talk heats up. We've seen Trae Young get moved. Talks about John Morant being moved. So we're definitely going to see some movement happen before the trade deadline. As we know, the Knicks are in position to try to make a different acquisition to change the trajectory of this team. My vote is for Jose Alvarado. If you're going to make that kind of move, he's on a small contract too. It's not like he's going to cost you a bunch of money. He's really just costing you assets. And you might have the ability to re-sign him in the future because you got to think along these lines. Maybe Deuce McBride is not paid for. Maybe he's not the guy that the Knicks want to invest in. So you got to have a backup plan for that. And I think he can offer that both short-term and long-term as far as if you were to acquire him. I'm more than sure he would re-sign here in New York if you were to actually get him into camp. So, but like I said, I named off those guys. I mean, you guys let us know in the comments later if you didn't see the show. Hit us up on the actual link to get to the show and leave a comment. Let us know you saw it, what you thought about the takes and about the free agent. The trade possibilities. And just let me know. It's always all good. Well, we overstayed our time. Well, I overstayed my time because I'm a big talker of the sport. Everybody knows me. I love basketball, so I can talk it probably in my damn sleep at some point. So, but needless to say, the Knicks are playing tonight. They're playing in Sacramento. This is the return of Mike Brown to his former team in which he was let go of. He didn't really have much to say from what I understand with the press conference. Mike's a very engaged guy. I mean, coming into this season, post Tom Thibodeau, he has definitely been a breath of fresh air in how he's dealt with the media and the fan base, and he kind of gets it all. So hopefully what we can see from the Knicks tonight is that they go out and compete for their coach and come home and win. Sacramento came off of did they win the other night? They may have. But they're showing a lot of grit also. So hopefully the Knicks get the dub. I think the game is at 10 o'clock. I might be wrong about that, but I know it's a West Coast game, so it should be pretty late. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all the guys or everybody who actually watched us. And we definitely appreciate you guys as fans of our show. We're trying to build it and grow it, obviously. So your input is very welcome. And like I said, if anybody feels like they might want to come on the show and talk, nobody bites. A little bark a little bit, but no bite. But it'd be nice to engage with some of you guys as well. So we'll work on hopefully getting someone in here, one of our fans, to talk some basketball. So we're going to wrap this up. My name is Tyran, as you know. You can check us out on the fan page, All Knicked Up, on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. And we do need to work on an Instagram one, and that's actually on me to work on that. But, yeah, we love you guys, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Let's go Knicks. Have a good night.